You are looking at a case file that sat untouched for nearly a quarter century, a case that crossed three categories of violent crime in a single morning. A case that left a community in Dubois County, Indiana, wondering whether the man who walked into their bank with a gun and walked out with their money would ever face justice. The answer, when it finally came, arrived in a form no one in 2000 could have predicted. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to the beginning. Act 1. The victim. It is September 1st, 2000, Labor Day weekend, the kind of late summer morning in small-town Indiana that feels ordinary right up until it doesn't. Ferdinand is a quiet community in Dubois County, the kind of place where people know their neighbors, where a bank is not just a building, but a fixture of daily life. Holland National Bank is open for business. The employees inside are doing what they do every working day. They have no reason to believe this morning will be any different. But somewhere nearby, a man is preparing. He has a handgun. He has a mask. And according to investigators, he is implying, whether through words or actions, that he is also carrying an explosive device. This is not a spontaneous act. This is calculated. This is someone who has thought through the terror he is about to inflict. The bank employees at Holland National Bank become his first victims. They are not statistics. They are people who showed up to work that morning and found themselves staring down the barrel of a gun, ordered to comply, threatened with consequences they had no way of measuring. And they did what anyone would do in that situation. They cooperated. They survived. But survival does not erase what happened to them. Act 2. The crime. The robbery of Holland National Bank is only the beginning of what unfolds on September 1st, 2000. After taking cash from the bank, the suspect does not simply disappear into the Indiana countryside. He extends his crime. He finds a home. He finds a mother and her child inside that home. And he restrains them. Let that settle for a moment. A mother and her child, restrained in their own home, by a masked man with a weapon who has already robbed a bank that morning. The classification of this case, robbery, home invasion, carjacking, reads like a list on a report. But behind each of those words is a human being who had no choice but to endure what was happening to them. Investigators from Dubois County respond. They gather what evidence they can. Witnesses provide descriptions of the masked gunman, but a mask is designed to defeat witnesses. There are no immediate suspects. There are no immediate arrests. The man who terrorized a bank, restrained a mother and child, and fled with stolen cash has simply vanished. And the trail, almost immediately, begins to go cold. Act 3. The cold years, 24 years. That is how long this case sits without resolution, from September 1st, 2000 to 2024. Think about what changes in 24 years. Children grow up. Investigators retire. Communities move on. Not because they forget, but because they have to. Life continues whether justice arrives or not. The evidence collected from the scene in 2000 includes DNA. That is a significant detail. DNA evidence existed, but existing and being actionable are two entirely different things. In 2000, the forensic tools available to law enforcement could tell you what DNA was present at a scene, and what they could not reliably do was tell you who that DNA belonged to when there was no matching profile in a database. Without a name, without a suspect to compare it against, the DNA sits. It waits. The case is not forgotten by everyone. Cold cases rarely are. But without new leads, without new witnesses, without a break in the silence, there is only so much an investigation can do. The file remains open. The question remains unanswered. And in Dubois County, Indiana, the man who robbed Holland National Bank and restrained a mother and child in her own home continues to exist somewhere beyond the reach of justice. Act 4. The break. In 2024, the Indiana State Police Cold Case Unit makes a decision that will change everything. They reopen the investigation, and this time they bring a tool that did not exist in any meaningful form when the crime was committed. The ISP's Forensic Investigative Genetic Genealogy Unit, known as the FIG unit, takes the DNA evidence from the 2000 crime scene and submits it for genetic genealogy testing. This is the science that has quietly been rewriting the history of cold cases across the country. Instead of simply searching for an exact match in a criminal database, genetic genealogy works outward through family trees. It identifies distant relatives. It maps bloodlines. It narrows populations of suspects down from thousands to dozens to single digits. In this case, the process works. The genetic genealogy analysis narrows the field of suspects to 3 brothers with local ties to the area. 3 brothers. A small, specific group of people, connected by blood to the DNA left at the scene 24 years earlier. Investigators begin the process of elimination. They determine that 2 of the 3 brothers are deceased. That leaves 1 surviving sibling. And here is where the investigation reaches one of its most precise and difficult moments. DNA testing is conducted on the surviving brother. The results come back. He is ruled out. The DNA from the crime scene does not match him, which means the answer lies with one of the deceased brothers. Investigators examine the remaining evidence. They work through what can be established. And they reach a conclusion they describe as establishing culpability beyond doubt. One of the deceased brothers is responsible for the robbery of Holland National Bank, the home invasion, and the carjacking that took place on September 1st, 2000. But here is the question that changes everything about how this case ends. If the person responsible is already dead, if there is no living suspect to arrest, no courtroom to bring him into, no jury to face, what does justice actually look like? Act 5. The Resolution. The Indiana State Police closed the case in 2024. Not because they gave up. Not because the evidence was insufficient. Because the investigation reached its conclusion. The perpetrator has been identified. He is deceased. There will be no arrest. There will be no trial. There will be no verdict read aloud in a Dubois County courtroom. And yet, investigators consider this case resolved. That word, resolved, carries weight here. For the bank employees who were threatened at gunpoint. For the mother who was restrained in her own home with her child present. For the community of Ferdinand, Indiana, which spent 24 years without an answer. Resolution, even without prosecution, means that the question has finally been answered. The name is known, at least to investigators. The case is closed. What this case represents is something larger than one robbery in one Indiana county. It is a demonstration of what genetic genealogy has made possible. Evidence that sat actionable but unmatched for nearly a quarter century became the thread that unraveled an identity. 3 brothers. A process of elimination. A conclusion reached not in a courtroom, but in a laboratory and a genealogy database. The technology that solved this case did not exist in the form investigators needed when the crime occurred, which raises a question worth sitting with. How many other cases from that era? Cases with DNA evidence, cases with no matching profiles, cases that went cold, not for lack of evidence but for lack of tools, are waiting for exactly this moment. How many files are sitting in exactly the condition this one was in on September 1st, 2000? The Dubois County case is closed, but the work of the Indiana State Police Cold Case Unit continues, and somewhere in a file cabinet or a digital archive, there is another case waiting for the same break. The question is not whether genetic genealogy will solve it. The question is when. Gumroad CTA. Download the interactive case file for this episode, including the full timeline, evidence breakdown, and genealogy methodology explained, at the link in the description.